Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a class from our 2022 Elul Learning Series.
We're in the Mahzor. We're on page 81, and we're going to look at the first, in terms of the structure of the Amidah, where these piyutim appear. This is the first poem, and as you will see, it serves as a kind of an introduction to the presence of other poems that will follow. It's called in Hebrew a reshut, which means permission. And if you look at the bottom of the page, the paragraph, this paragraph, the word reshut means permission. And the notion is that very often the editors or the people who put together these prayer books and added in the poems needed to get, so to speak, get permission, or at least to justify how it is possible for them to include these poems within the Amidah itself, right? The Amidah is sacrosanct. That is one of the two basic structures of prayer, the other one being the Shema and its blessings. And these are foundation. These are the two linchpins, the foundation points of the ritual. So how do you have the chutzpah to introduce a foreign element into these prayers, especially here, which is in the very first blessing, right? And here they're adding in words within the framework. They're not part of the prayer. It's intended. It's not like, for example, what we saw last week with the Uvachain passages. The Uvachain passages actually became a permanent fixture of that prayer of the Kedusha for the high holidays, as will something else we're going to see in a moment. Okay, they're there all the time on the holidays, the ones we studied last week. What we're going to see in a moment that we have here actually occur more frequently. Not this. I'm not talking about this, but what this is going to introduce are elements of the prayer that not only appear on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The next thing we're going to talk about appears in all of the Amidahs throughout the 10 days of penitence. Okay, so that's a real big addition. And they're being added to these very seminal blessings. So somebody has to give the justification and sort of get permission from the ancients to be able to do this. Okay, and that's what this is now going to tell us. Okay, so let's look. It's a very short thing, as you can see. It's only 5 lines, but it's amazing how much information is packed into these 5 lines, as you see as we start to unpack it, which is the purpose of our class, of course. Okay, so Misot Chachamim Unevonim. Okay, from the counsel or basic principles established by Chachamim Unevonim, by wise and knowledgeable people. Okay, Umilemet Da'at Mevinim. Okay, and from the teachings of the knowledge of these people who understand. Eftechafi b'tefila u'b'tachanunim. I will open, the poet is saying, I will open my mouth with prayer and with supplications, lechalot u'lechanein, to entreat, to beg from God and to plead with God, to lachalot u'lechanein, which is to plead and to beg from God, pnei melech malchei hamalachim, right, from the king of kings. Now, that's a very unusual definition for God. We'll come back to that. And the Adonai HaAdonim, and the master of masters. the supreme master and the supreme king. Okay, that's what this is. So in other words, what he's saying is that I have what I'm doing here. The poet is saying, I'm actually bringing in now, with the permission of the authors, poems that were written by very knowledgeable people, very intelligent people. And the permission to do this was granted in antiquity by very knowledgeable people. Okay, that's what the poem is saying. So on the basis of that authority, I have permission now to introduce into the structure of the prayer all the poems, all the piyutim that will follow. Okay, so that's what the poet of this piece is doing. He's speaking for everybody, everything that's going to come afterwards. All right? Again, because he understands that there is controversy about adding in these poems. And indeed, there were. Even to this day, there are traditions that, for the high holidays, I'm not talking Reform, Orthodox traditions that do very little or no piyutim, because they feel that it's a kind of a compromising of the uniqueness of the high holiday prayers. Most of our liturgies do have them. All right, and if you even compare the the piyutim within the Mahzor Lev Shalem to the ones in the previous iterations of our Mahzorim for the conservative movement, there are things in here there are things in there that are not in here. There's some stuff in here that was not in there, because it's fluid. The poems not being part of the fixed prayer, with the exception of the ones that were part of the fixed prayer, like what we read last week. That's fixed prayer. So it's going to be in our tradition, it's going to be in all of them. But the other poems are not. They're intentionally insertions to highlight certain themes that I would say the editors of the prayer books believed to be significant for this liturgy. Okay, so that's what this is. But I want to show you this little poem is a poem. It's not simply a statement. How do we know this? Okay, first of all, listen carefully. Listen to the Hebrew. Misod chachamim u'nevonim u'milemed mida'at mevinim eftechafi b'tfila v'taknunim l'chalot u'l'chanein pnei melech malchei hamlachim ha'adonei ha'adonim. They all end with yim. That's called a rhyme, right? Similarly, the first two lines and the second two lines, the first couplet and the second couplet, do what we saw last week, where it's as if the second one sort of adds to and picks up on the same theme as the first one. That's part of poetry, going back to the Book of Psalms. So misod, from the insights of the wise and those with understanding, and from the teachings of the knowledge of those who have understanding, right? So that's the repetition in two different ways of the first element. Then I will open my mouth with prayer and with supplications to supplicate God, right? Who is the King of Kings, and then it's continued, and Adonai HaAdonim. So it's a little poem, all right? But within the little poem, in addition to what we just talked about, the rhyme and the structure, there's some fascinating ideas that I cannot let you go by without calling to your attention. The term Melech Malchei Hamlachim, the King of Kings, is found nowhere in the Bible. It's not a biblical source. It's not a biblical concept. Melech Hamlachim is, and we'll see in a moment, Adonai HaAdonim is, but Melech Malchei Hamlachim is not a biblical term. Okay, so it's a rabbinic term, and it is found from time to time in the Midrash. It is suggested. So what does it mean? The King of Kings. Now, Melech HaMlachim we know about. That's more common, the King of Kings. Okay? In fact, a certain Jewish preacher around the first century, the Common Era, associated that with himself. Okay, well, no, his followers did. Let's put it that way. He didn't talk about Jesus. But the Gospels will refer to Jesus as the King of Kings. When he used the term, I don't even know if he exactly used it. He was probably talking about his Father, in other words, about God. But the disciples afterwards used that term to refer to him.
The Seleucid emperors referred to themselves as King of Kings.
The Persian emperors referred to, that's exactly what I was going to say. Who said that, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. All right, so what's this?
We're one-upping them.
This is the King of Kings. He's above them, right? He's their boss. He's the boss of everything. Exactly. It was many scholars suggest, remember, the Babylonian tradition developed under the Persian rule, right?
Exactly. So the Bavli is that as the.
Well, it would be a Bavli. It would come out of the Bavli tradition. Yeah, exactly. But the term spread. The term spread because you find it in Midrash, that is Eretz Yisrael. So it became very well. It was a bestseller. Okay, it was a bestseller.
We sing it every other Shabbos.
Wait. Time out. You got to see hands. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
We just in modern times we sing it every Erev Shabbos in Shalom Aleichem.
Yeah, of course, and you sing it in the Aleinu also, right? Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Exactly. So it caught on. There's no question about it. But this Adonai HaAdonim is also very interesting. That's only found twice in the whole Bible, that term, Adonai HaAdonim. And it's not that common in rabbinic sources either. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 17, and it's in Psalm 136. Hodu, some of you, Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasdo. Hodu le'Elohei ha'Elohim, ki le'olam chasdo. Hodu l'Adonai ha'Adonim, ki le'olam chasdo. And in Deuteronomy also, it has Elohei ha'Elohim, the God of gods, followed by the Master of masters or Lord of lords. Okay, so those two terms come together. They are in the two biblical sources. They are actually together. So it's not surprising but here it's different. What is it here? Melech Malchei Hamlachim, Adonai ha'Adonim. So our author here chose to use the word Melech. Okay. Now, we don't know if this was written specifically for the liturgy of the high holidays, but I have a hint that it was, because when it says Melech Malchei Hamlachim, why is that so important for the high holidays?
Well, on the high holidays, putting God on a throne of kingship is a recurring theme, a very important recurring theme through the whole period. And the other thing that makes it seem like this is probably for the high holidays, to me, is that we have several prayers intended for a shliach tzibur to read or say that they're praying on behalf of the whole kahal, and that's pretty scarce the rest of the year.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I happen to be of the opinion that this was written specifically for the high holiday, especially because of all the days of the year. Now, there are piyutim that were written for other holidays, but in terms of a relatively wide acceptance of their use for the in the high holidays, this became very important. And I don't know if the tail wagged the dog here. I don't know if it just over time, over the century, starting, remember the Ubechain paragraphs we did last week could go back to the 3rd century. These things are probably 5th, 6th, 7th century. But we don't know if that's when they first entered into the liturgy, right? The first thing, these things don't come in until the Middle Ages. So it's hard to know. It's very possible that once the creation of piyutim became more common and its acceptance as part of the liturgy began to grow, that this was put in order to deal with that. Generally speaking, we know going into the Gaonic period, the Babylonians, even though a lot of piyutim came out of there, the Babylonians tended to be less prone to accept them than the Jews of Eretz Yisrael. And over time, however, I think, vox populi, right? The voice of the people was heard, and the people liked them because they helped express the feelings that they wanted to feel, the spiritual notions that they felt were relevant to them on the high holidays. So now there's one final point I want to make, though. The word sod. Now I looked up that word, and in the Talmudic lexicon, it has 4 meanings. Okay, and the 4 meanings are as follows: a foundation, like yesod, a foundation. And okay, number 2, counsel, right? Advice, counsel. Or number 3, so counsel meaning with an E, okay, S-E. But it could also mean counsel with a C-I. It can mean deliberation, okay? But there's another meaning that it's also known for, and that is what in today's Hebrew, we use the word sod particularly to refer to what?
Secret.
A secret, exactly. So what crossed my mind is, given the fact that many of these poems, in fact, bear the influence of the style of prayer of the early mystics who wrote their compilations of their mystical lore around the same time that all of this was happening, and whose style has had an impact on many, many elements of our daily and festival prayer. So I'm wondering if, in fact, this person was coming out of that tradition, at least that literary tradition, may not have been fully a mystic. But the notion was because a lot of those terms came from the books that were called sod. They were secret. They were secret books. They were mystical books that people were very uncomfortable sharing because they were afraid that the simple people who did not have the background to appreciate them properly could have been misled into a God concept that was not part of our tradition. Because the thing is, these ancient poems, these mystical, not just poems, the texts that compiled these visions of great Torah sages, and that's the thing. Great rabbis like Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael, according to you've all heard of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael was his colleague, both giants in the first part of the 2nd century Common Era. All right? So these guys go up to heaven, and they have these visions of God and the angels. Visions, okay? And they see God. They see Metatron, who actually used to be Chanoch, the guy who God took up in Genesis. You read the book of Genesis, you read the genealogy of Adam. There's this one of the down the way. There's a guy called Chanoch, and it says he didn't die. God took him up to heaven. That's in the Torah. So he morphed in the temple, according to some of these ancient mystical traditions. He became the boss angel up there. Okay, the boss angel, Metatron. All right, so the boss angel takes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel around, looks at all kinds of stuff up there. Now, if you are an untutored, non-intellectual Jew living in the year 800, and you start reading these things, then it looks like God has a body. I mean, you can see God, and all these angels up, and this guy Metatron is so powerful. Maybe Metatron's a god. Maybe he's a semi-god. Maybe our monotheism isn't so pure. And so that's why a lot of these books were considered to be sod, secret. You have the same notion when you get down to Kabbalah later in the Middle Ages, and you have the same notion when you read Maimonides, his philosophy. He says, don't read this book unless you have studied science and physics and philosophy and Talmud and all kinds of stuff. I see a hand. Denise, do you have a question?
Yeah, is sod also in the words of the Kedusha that we say every week?
Where? I'm trying to think. Which one? The Shabbat holiday?
Yeah, Shabbat.
Let me think.
As in Kasod Siyah?
Yeah.
Yes. Good. That is correct. And those lines are influenced by these mystical traditions. This whole notion of the angels talking to each other, right? Right? They answered this one back. Okay. Now that you can find to some degree in Ezekiel, but it's also something that is one of the major features of these ancient mystical treatises is that you have the angels are constantly praising God, and they have different choirs of angels that sing back and forth. Yes, exactly. Kasotziach Sarfe. That's Naritz Chavanak Tishka Kasotziach Sarfe Kodesh. Right. Hamakdishim Shimcha Kodesh. Right. All that stuff is highly, and the same thing with the Kedusha in the Yotzer before the Shema. When you say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh earlier in the Shacharit service, there too the angels are involved because, that's when Isaiah said those words, he was looking into heaven. That's what he saw. Okay, so yes, but thank you for mentioning that. Good point. You get a gold star. Okay, very good. Okay, anyway, so I'm just throwing it out. It may be then that this is an intentional statement by the author of this, indicating that these poems that are very spiritual come from a spiritual tradition that has the hechsher of the rabbis, because two great rabbis were the guys who really were involved with this thing, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael, for example. But that's a guess. I'm not going to write a dissertation on it. But it's just interesting to think about. Anyway, so this is the introduction then. So now that this has been stated, we can immediately jump into an expression of that. All right. So turn to page 82 at the top of the page. Right after you say this, what comes next?
The piyut that took over the entire holiday.
The what?
The piyut that took over the entire holiday.
But I don't know that it's a singular piyut. There's 4 different statements. Whether or not, I know there's 4 let's say the 4 statements did. Yes, the 4 statements did. Okay. So right there, Zochreinu l'chaim, right? Zochreinu l'chaim, melech hafetz b'chaim, or Zochreinu l'chaim, whatever your melody is. We all know that one. Okay. That is a poem. Okay. And it's so obvious when you listen to it. You ready? So listen. Zochreinu l'chaim, melech hafetz b'chaim, v'chatvenu b'sefer ha'chaim, l'mancha Elohim chayim. Okay? So the word chayim appears 4 times, right? And there's even a structure. The first clause is Zochreinu l'chaim, it's 2 words. Then it's melech hafetz b'chaim, 3 words. V'chatvenu b'sefer hachayim, 3 words. L'mancha Elohim chayim, 3 words. Got it? So clearly it's a poem. And you find in here, and you will see this in all of them, the theme, the overriding theme is, guess what? What's the most commonly repeated word?
Time, life.
Exactly. So, and that's going to recur, surprise, in all 4 of these passages that are dispersed in an organized fashion through at the beginning and at the end of the Amidah, not only for Rosh Hashanah, all Amidas on Rosh Hashanah, and all the Amidas on Yom Kippur, but all the Amidas during the 10 days. In other words, this is even more ubiquitous than the Uvachain passages that we talked about last week. Okay? And they're each one of them, some of them are quasi-poems, some of them you can really define as poems. But you'll see there's even a connecting structure among all 4, which is really very interesting. At least it is to me. I don't know if you're interested in it, but I sure am. Okay. Now, but there's something else. In each one of these lines is a word that connects them with the context within which they are found. Okay? So now, here's the thing. What word in Zochreinu L'chaim is associated with the first blessing of the Amidah? I'll give you a hint.
Melech?
It's the first word.
Zochreinu?
Zocher, Chasdei, Avot, V'imahot, if you add in imahot. First paragraph, right?
Yes.
Zocher, Chasdei, Avot. He remembers the commitments of the patriarchs and matriarchs. Okay? And that's something we talk about a lot on the high holidays. Remember our ancestors. We are the descendants of Abraham and Isaac. Isaac, who allowed himself to be sacrificed on the altar. Abraham, we are their descendants. We have a little yichus, right? It's called Zechut Avot. Judge us favorably and compassionately because of the merits of those who came before us. We got brownie points from them. Okay, so lighten our sentence. That's basically the argument. So there it is. Okay, Zochreinu, exactly. Now notice here also, you have the verb Zachar, Zochreinu, and Kotvenu, right? Write us for life, remember us for life, and write us for life. So both of those are, if you will, a permanent recording of our merit. Okay, right? When God remembers, the whole point is remember and don't forget. And if you should forget, we will remind you. But even better is writing, because where's God going to write it? In the book of life. It's going to be written in the book of life. Okay? So, those are the 2 ways that this thing has. And it's very interesting, by the way. It's reminiscent of the 2 Torahs that we have. What are our 2 Torahs? Torah shebich.
Oral and written, right? And
Ba'al Peh, right? The written Torah and the oral Torah. The written Torah was written down, but the oral Torah was remembered. So in a sense, you can see here, it's a subtle allusion to the 2 modes of recording that emerge out of the rabbinic tradition. Okay? All right. So that's the first line. And now remember, though, it was immediately preceded by the Misod Chachamim, by that little poem. And remember, we still haven't finished the first blessing, because what comes right after Zochreinu L'chaim? Melech Ozer Ufokedu Mashiach Magen Baruch Ata Hashem Magen Avraham Ufoked Sarah. The blessing comes after this line. So you see the chutzpah of the poetry here, First of all, the introduction, the misod, right? The reshut, the permission paragraph is stuck in there even before the blessing, and the Zochreinu line is stuck in there before the blessing, right? So this is really, playing around with that blessing, isn't it? It makes the addition of the matriarchs like a little insignificant thing when you compare it to the changes that this is making in terms of the whole focus of the blessings, or let's say a huge addition to not a real change, a huge addition to it. So this is going to be part of the tradition of the high holiday. Okay, the next one, turn to page page 82. Okay, I'm sorry, that's 82. Turn to page 83. The Micha Mocha Av Harachamim. Got it? It's toward the end of the second blessing. Again, before the final blessing. Page 83. You see it? Micha Mocha Av Harachamim Zocher Yitzur Rahav L'chaim Berachamim. All right? Got it?
Yep.
That's also a mini poem. Okay, you have Av Harachamim, Yitzurav Berachamim. And you got forwards. Okay? Now, but now look, what is between Katav and Zachar, what is mentioned here? Zocher, remember. Right? It doesn't talk about writing here, just talks about remembering. But there again, L'chaim Berachamim. So there's your L'chaim. Got it?
Yep.
Okay. Now, hint. The key word here that hooks this into the blessing. The key words are Micha Mocha.
And even Micha Mocha Av Harachamim.
Huh?
Yeah, Micha Mocha.
Yes. Where is it?
It's just in the previous line. Micha Mocha Baal Gvuros Umi Domelach.
Right. Micha Mocha Baal Gvurot. Right. Who is Micha Mocha? Right. Who is like you? Right.
And it also ties back to the first one we did because it's got, in this case, Zocher Yitzur of L'chaim, just as the first one started, Zochreinu L'chaim.
Right. So the first one, remember, what we're going to see now is the first one has both ways of recording. Yes, the written and the remembered. Now we're just focusing on the remembering. Okay? All right. So now go to page 90. What do we find there? The very short one. Uchtov l'chaim tovim kol b'nei britecha. Do you see it? Before the final blessing, before the final bracha of that blessing. Uchtov l'chaim tovim, right? And write for life, inscribe for life, good life. Kol b'nei britecha. Okay? So there is write. Does it have remember? No. Just write for life. Well, what kind of a life? A good life. Good. We want a good life. Now, tovim is the key word here that hooks it into the context of the blessing. And where do you find that?
Oh, because it says kol b'nei britecha?
Huh?
No, it's tovim.
Because tovim is plural, and then kol b'nei britecha is like all the people. It's not just for yourself.
But I'm talking the word tov itself.
Tov is in the previous line, Hatov ki l'chol rachamecha, and it's also in the Chatima, Hatov shimcha.
Right. Exactly. So the word good is an integral part of that blessing, of the 18th blessing of the 19 blessings. Yes? So context. All right. Very good. Now, let's look at another large one. I'm not sure if this is a poem or just a supplication, because I'm not seeing too much structure in here. Maybe you can find it. I don't see it that much. All right. But now let's read it. All right. Page 91, before the end of Oseh HaShalom, before the Chatimah, the final blessing. All right. So there you have B'Sefer Chayim Bracha V'Shalom U'Farnasa V'Tova. I'm sorry, I won't expose you to any of my singing again. Nizacher v'nikatev lepanecha anachnu b'chol amcha Beit Yisrael l'chayim tovim u'l'shalom. Okay, so now, what is, you can see, the Sefer Chaim begins with Chaim, and it sort of ends with Chaim. So there's your Chaims. But now look what it says. As I said before, this part of a structure. The first blessing referred to both remembering and writing. Yes? And now the last blessing of these, the last four of these insertions into the blessing, what does it say? Sefer Chaim, Brach V'Shalom, Parasatva, Nizacher v'nikatev. Right? So I'm suggesting then that whoever wrote these four things, or whoever had the creative mind to insert all of them, I think it's clear that the person who wrote them wrote intentionally four separate statements to conform to the themes of the four blessings in which they are found. And that they did so, they also did so by creating a structure of having, it would be A, B, A, B, A, B. Zachor, Katav, Zachor alone, Katav alone, and then again, Zachor, Katav. So it's a structure. And it covers an amazing array of concepts that are part of the spiritual focus of the days, right? Remembering, clearly, we have Zichronot, right? And in fact, if the Misod focused on kingship, right? Here, obviously, remembering is a big one, because we have in the Musaf, Malchuyot, the kingship verses, Zichronot, the remembrance verses. So this fits in with these major themes. Excuse me. Then you have Av HaRachamim, right? And you have Melech. There it is, Melech Chafetz B'Chaim. Of course. We got a king over there in the first one. So there is the king. But then you have Av HaRachamim, right? The compassionate parent. Also a very important theme. That's all. It's all over the place. That's not just on the high holidays. But this notion of reminding God that God is our compassionate parent. And that's, so our whole idea is it's amazing. There's a lot of chutzpah from the human perspective woven into these prayers. Not only are we imploring God for forgiveness, but we're reminding God and say, remember God, you're our parent. Remember God, you're compassionate. Remember God, we have credit. Remember this, remember that. Work on it. We're throwing out these challenges. You said this, you said that. Okay? So this is a dialogue in a sense between us and God. Now you see why it's called the Yamim Noraim. Right? The days of awe, the days of awesomeness, the days of awesomeness, right? Norah comes from the same root as Yud Resh Aleph, which means to fear, to revere and to fear. So these notions of awe and reverence, awesomeness, and fear, I mean, they run throughout the day, but at the same time, we're standing up to God. And we're not allowing this fear to humble us to the point that we can't, throw it back at God. So it's a dialogue. Some of you know from some of the drashot I've given in the past, or some of my interpretations of prayers. I love Rabbi Yitzchak of Berdichev, the Berdichev Rav. Because Rav Levi Yitzchak is the guy who on Yom Kippur would stand up in front of God and says, what? We're the chosen people? Chosen for what? We suffer, okay? And we don't even have a king. These people have a king. These people have a king. We don't have a king, and they're beating up on us all the time. What is this? Did you forget who we were? So he yells at God. Then what does he say? It's before Musaf. So what do you say before you start the Amidah on Musaf? Yid Gadal, Yid Gadal, you sing. Yid Gadal, Yid Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, yeah? So he goes right into the Kaddish. Praise God, praise God, praise God. So he yells at God. He's got the chutzpah to yell at God because he has such a strong faith in God. Okay, it's like yelling at a parent. You're not supposed to yell at your parents, but come on. You do when you were a kid because you love them and they love you and you think they're being unfair. Hey, Mom, Dad, be fair. That's not how many times did your children say to you or did you say to your parents, that's not fair, right? It's a trope that kids say to their parents, right? Well, it's the same thing on the high holidays. We're yelling at God and saying, that's not fair. Okay. We are who we are. We got a covenant. So we're little Moses, right? Because you think about it, golden calf, right? How does Moses respond to God's desire to destroy the people and start over with him? Remember what he says? You can't do it. There's two reasons. One, it'll destroy your PR, right? The Egyptians will say, what kind of a God is this who took the people out of the desert just to kill them? This is a God. And secondly, maybe even theologically and internally more important, you have a covenant with us. You made a covenant with our ancestors. It's an eternal covenant. You can't break it. You want to have a reputation of being a God who breaks his promises? That's what Moses said. So in a sense, we're sort of playing that role. Poo, poo, poo. We're not Moses, but he sets an example. So anyhow, getting back to this, the themes here. So Ava Rachamim, compassionate parent. By the way, what is a poem that we recite at the end of Shacharit and later on the day on Musaf at the end of Mincha, and on Yom Kippur, Shacharit and Mincha, I think both. What Avinu Malkeinu, right? You say at other times during the year as well.
Avinu Malkeinu is at the end of Shacharit and at the end of Ne'ilah.
Yes. But that's right. Thank you. Isn't it the end of Mincha?
No.
No? Okay.
I don't think so. I could be wrong. No.
That's all right.
Easy place to check.
Huh?
I feel like it might be Musaf because I hear it and I'm not usually in Shul for Shachrit. So
yeah, okay.
I'm thinking they
I know it's Shachrit. I know it's the end of Ne'ilah. But I think it's also is it the end of Mincha?
I'm checking Mincha right now.
It's also at the end of Mincha.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Hey, I didn't forget. Isn't that good? All right. Anyway, so Avinu Malkeinu. It's also a poem. That's a plea. That is a real all-out wow. But notice the order. Some of you who studied prayer with me know where I'm going with this, if you remember. What's the order? Avinu Malkeinu. Here's the question. Do you ever find a place where it says Malkeinu Avinu? If you can find that place, let me know. I've been looking for it for the last 50 years. Haven't found it. Okay? It's Avinu Malkeinu. Why? Any thoughts?
It's describing our Avinu, our
Wait.
Father.
Raise hands. Okay, Norm.
I learned
and Barbara
that we're trying to move God from his king care to his father care. So we want to emphasize that relationship and caringness on his part rather than the remote kingship judgment.
Good. Okay, Barbara.
Well, I just see it that his being our father, our parent, is more important than being our king. The father is just the major person in our life.
Yes, good. And
it's more personal being the father than it is being the king.
Yes. Relationship. Tamar?
Well, I was going to say just about the same thing, that you're starting in a very personal way and then acknowledging that you are addressing the higher power, but it starts within your own close relationship. That's what you're calling upon.
Yes. I mean, God says, Banim atem ladonai, right? In Deuteronomy, a couple times. You're my children. So he's Abba. Okay. And that's the point. The parent, look, in the Ahava Rabbah prayer that we say right before the Shema, right? We say, Avinu, Ha'av, Harachamam, Rachem, Aleinu.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Our Father twice and 3 times compassion. All right? So God, a parent is compassionate. And it says, V'tein b'libeinu, and put in our souls, in our hearts, lahavinu lahaskil, to be able to properly understand and carry out in life the laws of Torah. Help us do your Torah. Because a father does that. Yeah? I mean, a good father, a good parent will not simply say, well, you can't do it. A good parent will explain and help you understand and help you appreciate why you can or why you should do something. That's what a parent's job is. A king, what does a king do? He issues an edict. That's it. Boom. And if you don't follow it, you're punished. That's the king. Parent is different. So we acknowledge the fact that God is king and God has the capacity to, do whatever God wants. But at the same time, we say, first, God, you're the parent. So it's this notion of the primacy. There are people whose only prayer experience is the high holidays. And this theme of Hamelech, right? And this whole notion of the fear and the threat of punishment. Who shall live and who shall die? Who their own time they said, who by fire, who by this, who by earthquake, who by that, right? The great Ulatana Tokev.
Right.
Okay? It's scary stuff. And so these people who daven only on the high holidays and that they pay attention to the prayers come away with the sense, geez, what kind of a God do we have anyway?
Yeah.
Right? But they forget that all these other places throughout the liturgy, right? And especially in these little introductory passages here, right? Rachamim pops up all over the place. And we are pleading all the time, reminding God that God is also the Rachaman. But the other thing they don't keep in mind is that all the other days of the year, while we do recognize sinfulness, what's the theme of the holidays? Right? What's the theme of Shabbat? Holidays. V'samachta b'chagecha. Rejoice on your holidays, right? And what's the theme of Shabbos? Get a good shluf, have some good meals, study Torah, have a relationship with the mishpucha. It's the best time for husbands and wives, to have their intimacy. All of these wonderful things are supposed to happen on Shabbos. So the people who come 3 times a year have the wrong theology. And I think it's probably done a lot of damage to their commitment as Jews, unfortunately, because they don't see the whole thing. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, that's my sermon for the night. Anyhow, but it's clear here. That's what's going on. Rachamim, right? But then the last, I forgot to talk to you about one other thing, though. In the last line on page 90, or the last piece on 91, what are the connecting? Here you got 2 connecting words to the context of the blessing. The blessing, of course, is Sim Shalom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are the last 2 lines The last two words of that insertion, of that poetic insertion, or that piyut, if you will. But the last two words, l'chaim tovim u'l'shalom. Right? So at the end of shalom, it's obvious, right? Sim shalom begins and ends oseh hashalom. So that's the blessing, the theme of the blessing. That's easy. But tovim also is here because it says, the tov be'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael. It's good in your eyes to bless us. So the wording also, two words here, sort of to bring it to a rousing conclusion, if you will, the crescendo. Two words, two key words from the final blessing, tov and shalom. Okay, so that's the end of that, and I'm almost done. This is good. All right, but I have one more point to make. Oseh hashalom, right? Mm-hmm. Normally, what do we say? Hamavarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom.
Yeah.
Who blesses his people Israel with peace. Yes? Okay. Now you should know that if you look at the Nusach Ari, which is what's called Nusach Sfard, and if you look at the traditions of Edot HaMizrach, and if you look at the Spanish traditions out of Spain, they all have Hamavarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom on the high holidays. They don't change it. It's basically the Ashkenaz tradition that changes. Surprise. Did you know that? Well, now you do. So we Ashkenazim, I don't know if everybody I'm teaching tonight is Ashkenazi, doesn't matter. I love Sephardim. Some of my best children, in-laws are Sephardim. We eat rice now on Pesach because of our Sephardic children. Yes. Anyway, the Ashkenazim use it. Nobody has an explanation why. I know where it comes from. Absolutely, no question whatsoever. It comes from the Eretz Yisrael version of the Amidah. It is said in the old Eretz Yisrael tradition, they said Oseh HaShalom all the time. Okay? It was the Bavli tradition from Iraq, which was Babylonia, right? The yeshivot in Babel, they are the ones who developed Hamavarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom, who blesses his people Israel with peace, which is a beautiful ending. It's very nice. Oseh HaShalom is very cut and dry, right? The other one, Hamavarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom, blesses his people Israel. That's we're talking about relationship, personal, parent, but much more consistent. So all the other traditions say stay with it on the high holidays because that's what we want to shoot for. That's the goal in our eyes and in God's eyes. So we Ashkenazim are stuck with Oseh HaShalom. All right? And it's interesting because one of the great German rabbis who actually published books both with the Sephard, what's called Nusach Sfard and Ashkenaz, in his commentary on this is Emden, Yaakov Emden, the great Yaakov Emden, beginning of the 18th century. Moses Mendelssohn studied with him in Germany. Okay, so Yaakov Emden was a genius, a little bit crazy, but he was a genius. Anyhow, he says, okay, the Ashkenazic tradition has Oseh HaShalom. He says, but the Sephardic tradition gets it right. He says that. He says it's better. You don't change it. So can you think of a reason why it should flip to Oseh HaShalom? Why the Ashkenazim might want to do that? Think for a moment. What happens to Ha'el HaKadosh at the end of the Kedusha on the high holidays? It becomes Melech HaKadosh, the Holy King, right? If you read in the weekday Amidah, it has in the blessing Hashiva Shoftenu, Karishona ve'yosein tekabat chileosos. Melech oheb tzedakah u'mishpat. The king who loves righteousness and judgment. That's how it normally ends. Now, in all the traditions, it ends Melech HaMishpat, the God of judgment. The word Ahava is removed. So why is it that Melech takes the place of El? Why is it that God who loves justice, the love comes out? Because 'tis the season for
judgment.
And it's a recognition that judgment is going to happen. Okay.
And we got to repent.
My theory is that the Ashkenazim changed Oseh HaShalom for the same reason. That Hamavarechet Amo Yisrael B'Shalom is very hopeful. But maybe we shouldn't be so hopeful, because if it did, maybe, it'd somehow limit our push to really change God's mind. I suggest that that's what it was. And if you think about it, the last time we say that is Ne'ilah. And according to Ne'ilah, what happens at the end of Ne'ilah?
The gates close.
The gates close, which means what?
The judgment is sealed.
The books are sealed. Now, we have the tradition that, later on people thought that was too harsh, right? I see hands going up. Okay. So let's say first Tybal, you were first, and then Denise. Tybal? Not there? You did it. Okay, whatever. Okay, Denise.
So I just have a question of why is it Ha-Shalom and not just Shalom? Like, what's the hey about?
Oseh Shalom. That's a good question. The peace.
Also because at the end, when you do the thing going backwards, like during the Aseret Meshuva, you add the hey, but like why?
Yeah, that's Oseh Shalom Bimromav. Yeah. It's probably for emphasis, but you're right. It's a good that style. I don't know.
It might be a reflection of the other Fatima, Hamvarechesmo Ba Shalom, because the Ba is like Baha. It's not Bishalom, it's Ba Shalom. And so here they kept Ha Shalom.
Oh, it's possible.
I was thinking much more of God as judge, and Ha Shalom is a different quality of peace than what we pray for on Alita. There's something more majestic about it.
Havarechet Amo Yisrael Bashalom, though, Bashalom is with the peace.
But it's with the peace, not just with peace.
That's it. So that could maybe that's the answer, because when you have a hey hashalom with a bet that precedes it, the bet picks up the ha sound of the hey. So when it says Hamavarechet Amo Yisrael Ba Shalom, it means with the peace. Mm-hmm. So without the bet, it's just carried over. But why the peace? Unless it's maybe.
I just talked to Baron.
Wait. I'm going to pick up on what Rachel suggested. It may be that it's referring to the peace, which perhaps could have a messianic thrust to it, which means the ultimate peace.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's a different end state than ordinary day-to-day peace.
Right. Exactly.
It's more of a specific type of peace.
Wait, hold on, Barbara. Tybal, are you there?
Yes. Yeah, of course my connection went down right at the same time, and you may have covered this, but I always thought the tradition was we have until Shmini Atzeres that the gates.
Yes. That's a tradition because they wanted to give, more time. Right, exactly. But the basic.
They're heavy gates. They're really heavy gates, so they take a really long time to close.
There are some, by the way, who say that you can even have down till Hanukkah. I'm not kidding.
I believe you.
So you really need it. I'm not going to get into an argument about that one. I don't know which is best, but you got to close it. The point is, the Ne'ilah, the whole concept of Ne'ilah implies the locking of the gates, right? Which means court is closed. Remember, the concept is in the ancient cities, the court sat at the gate of the city. This is biblical. The court sat at the gate of the city. And at night, when the gates of the city were closed, the court went home, right? So that's the imagery. So that's what Ne'ilah is about. So one could argue, if we really have until Shmini Atzeret, then why should we have Ne'ilah? We can shorten the service a little. I know you got to wait till 3 stars come out, so you need the extra service to fill the time. Well, the rabbi could give a longer sermon, or the chazan could give the hymn that he always wanted to give before Musaf and last an hour and a half, whatever you want. Okay. All right. Mara. Wait, Mara.
Thanks. So yeah, I like the point you're saying that Ne'ilah means it's done, it's over, the gates are closed. But then what about the concept that the gates are always open for whoever wants to, make tshuva, that's always open for that possibility.
Well, I mean, the point, I think the whole notion is that ultimately God is compassionate, right? So there's 2 ways of dealing with that. The one way is to say compassion exists, but there's a limit. And you cannot simply say that consequences shouldn't exist, right? In other words, the Rambam, it's really interesting, and it's a debate. For example, the Rambam says that of the 13 attributes of divine compassion, you know the line, Adonai, Adonai, El Racham V'chana, get used to, we're going to say it a lot on Yom Kippur, right? Adonai, Adonai, El Racham V'chanu, Erech Apayim. Those are the 13 divine attributes of compassion, all right? All right. The rabbis cut it off at a certain place and to change the meaning of it. But Rambam looks at in the context where it's found in the book of Exodus in chapter 34. And there it says, V'nakeh lo yinakeh, that God does not withhold punishment, right? He will punish where he has to. That's what it says. And Rambam says that's there because of idolatry, okay? There's no way that you can do tshuva for idolatry. God's going to punish you. Because like the book of Deuteronomy, Rambam is what's the word? I can't think of the Latin. Never mind. He hates idolatry. Okay? He despises idolatry. So that's his interpretation. So he's looking at the full text. Read the text in the beginning. It's verse 5 and 6 in chapter 34 of Exodus. When we finish, look at it and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's not pure forgiveness. So there are those who would say there's a limit to forgiveness. The person who's done the wrong, remember, has to do tshuva. If they don't do tshuva, there cannot be forgiveness forthcoming. So it's not there's got to be an end. So that perspective then, that's what Ne'ilah is supposed to represent. Keep in mind this, you cannot keep that book open. It doesn't stay open all the time. I.e., and it's true, if you don't do tshuva, the scar will still be there, right? And, you and I know people who were hurt by somebody else, and sometimes you don't even know you hurt them. That's the sad part about it. Then they say, no, they keep it inside, and it just percolates and percolates and percolates, and it's bad news. So Ne'ilah says, make an end point. So Shmini Atzeret is an extension. All right, it's a minhag. It's a custom. But the notion, sure, but the whole idea is Rambam, all the authorities say, Every day you do tshuva. There is in the Amidah, the prayer for tshuva, and you say tachanun as well. We are asking, every single day, we ask for forgiveness from God. And we're supposed to do tshuva. Rambam says, if you never know the day you're going to die, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to do tshuva all the time, so that by the time, if you should die, you will have cleansed yourself before you die. And of course, that means going to God and asking forgiveness, and going to people whom you may have wronged. It also means that the person who was wrong should come forward and say, you hurt me. If I didn't know that I hurt you, how can I ask for forgiveness? So forgiving, the whole concept of tshuva is complex, because people are complex. All right, anyway, so you choose for yourself. How do you want to feel forgiven? You want to feel forgiven at the end of Nila? I'll be gesund. If you feel, I did some very bad things that reminded me of it, I'll wait. I'll do it over before the end of Sukkot. I'll take care of it. I'll be gesund. And if you really wake up the day after Simchas Torah, and you say, "Oh my God, I forgot something," you got until Hanukkah. Okay, take your pick. It's a free country. Okay, wait, Tamar, did you have a final question? Oh, okay. No. All right. So
don't forget emails you wanted.
Email, thank you. Yes. Please, everybody, send me an email with your email, or just send me an email, jrembaum@tbala.org. So I know some of you I have it, but send them all together. You don't have to send them together, but if you'll send them to me like tonight, they'll all be together, and I can make a list and know who is in my class, so that I can contact you if I have to. Okay, very good. All right. So next week, excuse me, we shall go ahead and look at the first of a, excuse me, fully developed piyut, Atahu Eloheinu, and if we finish that, we can look at Le'el Orech Din. Okay, these are two of the piyutim that we say all the time, and that's why I have selected them. All right? Very good. It was a pleasure. So next week,
I thought we're not meeting next week.
We are meeting. No, we are.
Oh, we are meeting?
Because I amended that because I realized I can do it from Denver the same way I do it from here. Initially,
but it'll be later for you, right?
So I start at 8:30. Denver's 1 hour difference. Yeah, it's all right. So by you it'll be 7:30. By me it'll be 8:30. No problem.
Okay.
It's
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah. Have a good trip.
Thank you.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.